For TRICHOMES.com, I'm Jesse Betend, and this is The High Ground. On this show, we feature leaders of the cannabis industry. We talk to everyone from farmers to CEOs and public officials, anyone making an impact on the cannabis community and beyond. America's queen of legal cannabis, that's according to Inc. magazine, is going international. Nancy Whiteman has earned a number of nicknames over the years, but her company, Wana Brands, is best known for edibles. Even their failures have been interesting, namely cannabis-infused chewing gum and beef jerky, which Whiteman told NBC was actually pretty popular back in 2018. It's just that the process of making it was, quote, blech. Today, we're talking with the Royal Highness herself. Nancy is here to talk us through the coming Canadian expansion and how the effects of COVID-19 have forced the company to adjust their plans. Nancy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be talking with you.
So, Entrepreneur Magazine called you the Martha Stewart of pot. How did that make you feel?
I love that. I think it's so funny. But the funniest part of that story is that, of course, probably a year or so later, Martha Stewart herself announced that she was getting into cannabis through a relationship with Snoop Dogg.
Really?
And my reaction was, wait a minute. I've already been declared the Martha Stewart of cannabis. You know?
Yeah, like, wait a second, lady. That's my identity. Oh, that's really great.
Yeah, that was very funny. Actually, my favorite, though, was Inc. magazine actually named me the Queen of Legal Weed. So that's my all-time favorite nickname.
I've got to say, there have been a lot of, actually a fair amount of nicknames, but also a lot of awards and write-ups and plaudits. And I wanted to start with the big news when it comes to expansion, which is that you guys recently have announced a partnership with Indiva, which means that you are coming to Canada. So how does that feel to be going international?
We are so excited. Honestly, we have been talking to potential partners in Canada for a couple of years, and we just really feel like we found the right partner for us with Indiva, and we're just thrilled and excited to get going.
What are some of the things that are different from the way that you are currently operating? And I'm sure that there's a lot, but just sort of like the broad categories.
Sure. Well, let's start with the positive one first, which is it's federally legal. So that's incredibly exciting. As you probably know, and as your listeners probably know, there are a number of pretty significant differences from province to province. So we're not completely out of the woods in terms of having to do some market adjustments, but certainly having a situation where the product can be distributed across the whole country is really exciting. Some of the major differences, though, are a little bit challenging. Canada opted to go with what they call a plain labeling regulation, which essentially means that there's almost no branding that can actually go on the package itself. Our packaging in the States is very colorful, and in most markets it has fruit, and it's makes you want to eat the product. Canada, it really is just a plain white package. You are allowed to have your company logo, but that's really about it. So I guess on the positive side, there's an even playing field in terms of packaging. Nobody's going to look incredibly terrific. On the other side, you really can't carry your brand through in the same way that we're used to. So that's obviously a pretty significant difference.
If I can actually just jump in there, in what ways are you trying to sort of carry the brand? How are you communicating your brand outside of packaging, or are there any kind of creative ways that you've thought of to do that besides?
Well, it is a challenge, and that is why, of course, the internet and airwaves do cross the country borders. And so our strong reputation in the United States certainly we think will be extremely helpful for us in Canada as well. But a lot of it will have to do with our partner, who's Indiva, and their sales team, and really equipping them with collateral and other marketing materials that can carry the day and tell our story in more depth. Some things that we might rely on packaging to do here, we're going to just have to develop other marketing approaches to get our key points across and to get a little bit more of the visual brand across. So there are ways to do it. It's just at point of sale, it's rather limited.
One of the big differences is dosage and how you can package those dosages.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. I was just going to get to that. Absolutely, that's correct. So, in most of the markets that we operate in the United States, have various delineations. The usual maximum is 10 milligrams per unit within the package. So, a typical recreational or adult use product would be a 10 milligram product with 100 milligrams total, or maybe 25 milligram products for 100 milligrams total. Canada takes it to another level. So their maximum is a 10 milligram product in total. And so you could have 2 5s, you could have 5 2s, you could, divvy up that 10 milligrams however you want, but the maximum is a 10 milligram product. And that, it does create some complications. It's obviously more expensive to produce just because the packaging has a cost to it. And it will end up being a more expensive product for consumers. But, Canada was very careful and very deliberate about how they wanted to release edible products to the marketplace. And they very much wanted to err on the side of being conservative on dosage and also on packaging, which we were just talking about. So those actually are the two main differences that I was going to pull out.
Sure. And so, I mean, you said it clearly yourself, but I think it's just kind of a funny visual. Basically, as an example, a typical package might have maybe like 10 gummies or something like that here in the United States. In Canada, to get the same amount of that you would normally get in sort of one, shall we say, not serving, but container, you would actually have to buy 10 individually wrapped gummies, right?
You would, yeah. Or 10 units of them. Now, it could be that they might have 2 gummies per unit, for example.
Right.
But yeah, to get 100 milligrams, you'd have to buy 10.
So we are all living through, this is going to be the most obvious statement of the podcast, a very unpredictable moment. What was the rollout plan here for moving to Canada, and how has the current moment with COVID-19 impacted that plan?
Yes, good question. So we had been planning on launching in July. Of course, with COVID and very legitimate concerns, obviously, around that, Canada did close the borders. And they were supposed to open the borders June 21st, and now they've moved it out to July 21st. Plus, they are putting in a requirement for people coming into the country to quarantine for 2 weeks once they arrive in the country before going on to their business or their personal, whatever the reason is for their trip. So that has, of course, created a lot of complication in terms of training. Normally, we do quite in-depth training. We do an R&D trip. Confectionery products and gummies in particular are very sensitive to both humidity and altitude. So every market that we go into, we actually do R&D. We tweak our recipe to adjust for the actual on-the-ground conditions. So we've had to do a bunch of workarounds with that. For example, we've been sending our partner Indiva non-medicated samples. And so that they know exactly what the texture and feel and flavor of the product is supposed to be. And then we're doing a huge amount of work with them remotely to get their team trained up. And so it's a combination of remote work, a lot of live, Zooming and FaceTiming, actually to train their team while our team is in their kitchen, their team is in their kitchen. So it's required a lot of creativity and a lot of flexibility on the side of both teams. The good news, though, is that for both of us, both Indiva and for Wana, we both have very experienced teams. We have one of the things that we did at Wana when we made a serious commitment to expanding our footprint is that we built out a whole out-of-state team to do nothing but to support our out-of-state partners. So our team is very, very experienced in onboarding new partners, getting them up to speed, not just the initial training, but then they're there for them really, I don't want to say 24/7, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but they are there for them whenever they need any kind of operational or production support. So one of the things that COVID has done for us is it's made us all a lot more creative in terms of how to work remotely with partners. And, in a perfect world, we'd still rather be there training people in person, but we are still planning on launching. So it's very exciting.
So this is kind of a weird question, but so what are some of the impacts of altitude on gummies? Like what can go wrong? Do they just kind of get melty and sticky, or what happens?
You know what? It's one of the reasons that I think Wana gummies are so popular is that they're very consistent. Certainly in Colorado, but we're in 8 markets in the United States. And we're in the process of launching in 3 more markets here, plus Canada. And we spend a lot of time on things like the texture and the feel when you bite into the gummy. And it's stuff like that changes with altitude and humidity. You do something called a Brix test, which tests for humidity, and the amount of liquid that goes into the recipe gets tweaked all the time, and cooking times gets tweaked. So it really just depends on the particulars of the kitchen and the situation, and also working with our partners to make sure that they understand humidity control and climate control within their kitchen and environment is an important part of it. And that's why we end up with such a consistent product from market to market.
That's really interesting. Is altitude in Colorado like the water makes the pizza crust better in New York? Like, is that your version of that?
It's not so much that it makes it better, but it's a variable that needs to be adjusted. Of course, as you know, the altitude here is high and it's very dry. But one of the things that's actually super helpful for us is because we are in so many markets, we have a starting point now when we start in a new market. We're getting ready to launch in Maryland, for example. So we're saying, okay, so it's sea level and there's this much humidity. What other market is close to that? Oh, Ohio is. Okay, so let's start with the Ohio recipe, have them try that, and we adjust from there. So the more markets you're in and the more data you have, the easier it becomes to fine-tune stuff.
So let's talk about, you mentioned that currently you're looking at around the end of July for the possibility of being able, are you kind of just waiting on the sidelines for the go ahead, and are you ready to just kind of spring into action as soon as you get the green light?
Well, we're actually going to be doing most of the training remotely, unless something should really change with the opening of the border. But I have to say, with the current spike that we've had here with COVID in the last couple of weeks, I personally would not be surprised to see Canada extend the border closing even further. So we are planning for being able to do a lot of this stuff remotely. And again, because of course it is legal to send non-medicated samples back and forth. So we can do a lot of testing and refining with our partners, by us sending them stuff and them trying things and then sending it to us. And so it's a lot of work around, but we are going to be able to do it.
What was your own personal experience with edibles? What was like your first time trying one?
Oh, God. That's actually, believe it or not, nobody's actually asked me that one before.
Really? I assume there was R&D.
Yeah, well, there was R&D. It mostly took place in high school, though, my original R&D. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a funny story that my high school class president, after the ink story came out about me, posted it in our Facebook group for my high school class, and proving once again that your high school friends know you the most. Most people who meet me now would not guess what it is that I do, but my high school friends found this to be quite a natural extension of what they knew of me. So I actually would not say that I had any real expertise in edibles until we started the company. And that was actually in 2010 when things had really just become legal in Colorado, and sort of the first round of regulation was in place where you had to have an official kitchen that you couldn't do it in your home. Of course, I wouldn't have done it in my home anyway. I had school-age children at that point in time. But so a lot of it really was sort of my partner and I started it and really just learned on the job. And a lot of the products that we started out with, actually, almost none of them are still on the market. Back in the day, then, there was no analytics. There was nothing to tell you what was going to be popular and what was not going to be popular. So everybody just tried a whole bunch of stuff, us included. And we just saw what worked and what didn't work. And when we started playing around with gummies, that actually came out of watching another company who was taking really products that you could buy in a candy store and just spraying them with hash oil. And it was clear that people liked that gummy format, but we really felt that we could do it better. And so we wanted a product that we made from scratch and that we infused during the cooking process, because consistency has always been very, very important to us. And so, it's hard when you're spraying something on top of something to make sure that it's even and it doesn't taste like hash oil and all that sort of thing. So we started in the gummy category rather early, and then we invested heavily in really developing a fantastic recipe. We work with food chemists, we work with outside consultants, and that gave us the ability to scale and to have a product that doesn't melt and really delicious flavors. So that was, some of it was homegrown, and then some of it we really did. We did use some outside resources to really refine it.
I know I got to let you go here, but last question for you. Any big news on the horizon besides your big expansion, or is that what's kind of taking your focus? What's the next big phase for Wana?
The next big phase for Wana, in addition to the expansion, is we are very, very focused on innovation in the category. And it was right before the lockdown, so I guess that was early March. But we released a really cool new product called Wana Quick, which is a fast onset version of our gummies using a really amazing technology. We researched quick onset technologies for 2 years before we chose this one. And we chose this one for several reasons. First of all, it truly is quick onset, 5 to 15 minutes for most people. Now, if you've just eaten an enormous meal, it might be a little bit longer. But the other thing that's very cool about it is because of the encapsulation methodology that's used, it bypasses that first pass metabolism that edibles usually have, which means that it gets converted in the liver to 11-hydroxy. So it stays in the delta-9 form, which is the same form that you ingest THC when you inhale. So if you're smoking flower or using concentrates. So the feeling of the product is quite different. It doesn't have that heavy body edibles high to it. It's more of an inhalation type high. And so many people just really, really like it. They also just really like the fact that the onset is quick and the offset is quick. So you could go to a concert, take a gummy, enjoy it, have a great time, drive home safely. So that was an example of a really innovative product. And it's just, even though we introduced it in the middle of the pandemic, it's just taken off like wildfire. Excuse me. And we have a host of other products that we're working on, equally innovative and unique. So that's really, in addition to our out-of-state focus, our innovation and new product development is really what we focus on.
Nancy Whiteman is the CEO of Wana Brands. Nancy, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. Thank
you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
You can find more cannabis industry reporting at TRICHOMES.com, as well as more great shows like this one. If you're a member of the cannabis community and you have a story you want to share with us, reach out. You can reach the show at highground at TRICHOMES.com. Please take a second to subscribe to the podcast and write a review. It really helps others find the show. And you can also join the discussion with industry insiders and get your voice heard by joining the community at trichomes.com and following us on all social media. The High Ground is produced by David Fortin. I'm Jesse Betend. Thank you for listening.